With the launch of BigSky as a plugin, the world of DAW reverb is changed forever. With 12 hand-tuned algorithms that feature world-class representations of traditional recording spaces like rooms and halls and plates, mixed with machines that incorporate unique and super creative possibilities like pitch shifting, filtering, formant control, vowel sounds, multi-head tape delay, all sorts of stuff, BigSky can transform your performances in a way that it would be impossible to do without it. So in this video, I'm going to show you 5 different audio examples that represent different processing challenges, and we're going to talk about ways that you can use BigSky to help you solve them. So in the first example, I have 3 simple cello voices. Cellos are big sounding instruments, they project, but it's not going to give me a wall of strings, it's 3 cello voices. So to make it a wall of strings, I'm going to use the shimmer machine. So I'm going to add a pitch an octave below my performance, and also a pitch 2 octaves above my performance. So the octave below is going to add power, it's going to give me girth, and the 2 octaves above is going to give me shine and some width. So I'll let you get used to the sound of BigSky on this performance, and then I'm going to turn it off. So you'll hear just 3 notes again, and then we'll turn it back on and turn it off again. So you can see that BigSky truly transforms 3 simple cello voices into an ominous wall of strings. Check it out. In one of my many former lives, I spent a long time as a composer commercially for film and TV and radio. And anytime you're going to be doing that against a deadline, you're traditionally using a bunch of MIDI instruments, either for the entire final output or just to mock something up so that real players will replace those parts, either drums and bass or an entire orchestra. And so if you're just starting out in some string writing, I can give you some tips and tricks on how to make your string performances feel more authentic and more realistic. The first is never get involved in a land war in Asia, of course. The second is make sure that you pay as much attention to the releases of the notes as you're paying to the start of the notes. So we all quantize our performances to make sure that they're in time, but when doing string stuff, I don't just play the notes on a keyboard and then leave them. I go through and make sure that the releases of the notes are creating the kind of vibe that I want. Sometimes for string passes, if you want it to feel like a bow is really going back and forth without stopping, the notes have to overlap somewhat to make it work. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. So spend a lot of time listening to the effect that changing the amount of the length of those notes makes to the performance. As well, sometimes it can be helpful to layer real instruments on top. So on this example, I actually got my old melodica out of the garage and recorded a melody on top of it. Because sometimes layering in a live instrument on top of MIDI instruments can help bring an organic sense and make it feel more realistic. And finally, you need to make sure that the audio environment that your instruments are living in is apropos to what you're trying to create. So this example is a string quartet with a harp on top of it and also the melodica being played live. And then basically I've used 3 different machines to simulate different positions where the players would be sitting in a room. So depending on where they're sitting in the room, the effect of their instrument might excite different types of reverbs in the room, maybe in the ceiling, maybe in the walls, maybe off the floors. So I've used 3 different types of reverb to help give the sense that the players are sitting in a complex and large room. Check it out. In the last example, I had to go into the garage and find the melodica in the case and bring it up into the house and make sure that it worked. In this example, I had to go out and see if I could figure out where the mandolin was. So once I found it, took the 20 minutes it took to actually have it stay in tune, and then another few minutes to remember how to play in fourths, I recorded a quick little example. Now, one of the things about mandolin that's important, the reason I did it, is because they're kind of small, there's not a lot of bass, but there's a lot of bark to the pick attack. Like, they really do bark and yell off of the front of the soundboard. And one of the things about a transient like that barks is it will reveal the pre-delay in a reverb sound. So what I've done with the reverb in this example is used it as a way to create some vibe so that it feels a bit more emotional and doesn't feel like something I just stuck in front of a mic to play as an example for this video, and feels more like something you'd expect to hear on a record or in a soundtrack. So give it a listen. If you haven't had a chance to see it, there's another video in this series that is an acoustic duet between myself and vocalist extraordinaire Cassie Brandy. But during that session, I also recorded some oohs to go underneath the baritone solo. And I did it for a reason. Oohs represent a processing challenge in that there's not a lot of transients in them. There's nothing to really make a reverb bounce from a transient. So what you're really doing with ambient processing with a track like this is you're really determining its depth in the mix. So generally speaking, something that's very wet feels like it's farther back in the mix, and something that's drier feels like it's forward and more in your face. So I've used the Magneto machine, which is based in part on a multi-head tape deck to provide the reverb for this. So those repeats are all diffused, so it feels like a reverb, but when you hear the singing stop, listen to the tail of the reverb and you'll hear the unique, sort of slightly bouncing character of it. Check it out. The last example represents another processing challenge in that it is a lead vocal supported by a choir and claps in a pop context. The problem, though, is that the choir was all created by the same voice, meaning me. So I recorded this for a record I never put out 10 or 12 years ago or something. And at that point, I put a microphone in the center of the control room, I stuck Pro Tools into loop record, and I walked around the room to different positions and sang 22 different harmonies just in one loop record path to try to recreate the sound of a choir. And I was modifying my distance from the microphone, my angle from the microphone, all sorts of stuff as a way to simulate, in some way, the effect that you'd get from a big wall of people standing in front of one mono microphone. The problem is that choirs are made up of people. Different people, white people, skinny people, tall people, short people, big voices, small voices. When you hear a choir in context, it sounds like one organic, harmonically rich thing, which is difficult to recreate with one body shape and one voice. So there are a number of ways you can attempt to make it sound more real. You can do what I've done by moving around the microphone. You can use some creative EQ to make some voices pop out and some voices a little bit less obvious. And you can also deal with the audio environment, the processing environment that your voices are in. So in this example, I've used 3 different machines. One as a delay for the lead vocal, one as a general ambience for the choir, and then I've used the nonlinear machine set to ramp to grow behind the choir as it continues to sing and get louder. So you'll notice as the example goes on, the choir and the vocals get more and more important sounding, to the point where if I were to turn the drums and the bass and the keyboards back on, the lead vocal and the choir would be much more prepared now to compete for importance with the rest of the instruments in the mix. Check it out.
I would give everything I know. I'd untie the wires that bind my soul. There's comfort in knowing what to do, but comfort can't blind you. Yeah, I would release that thing in me that must learn about all that I see, without the skill to codify. I'd be forced to let fly.